everyone, and welcome to A View from Brussels. I'm here today joined by Vincent Guerre, Director for Trade and Competitiveness at Sea Europe and author of The Son-in-Law, a satirical novel about the negotiation of a fictional EU law regulating the color of the sun. Behind the humour, the book offers a detailed look into how Brussels actually works, but also about the wider questions it raises for Europe and whether the EU system is still capable of long-term strategic thinking. Vincent, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you for inviting.
You chose satire to explain EU policymaking. What could this genre reveal about Brussels that a traditional policy book couldn't?
Well, I used the satire, so here you see the book, as a way to make the EU more accessible. Because satire, it's a gentle criticism. It's not like being sarcastic. It doesn't mean to be too blunt. So it's a nice way to take some distance and to look at it with different eyes. So I've picked a topic, very absurd, regulating the color of the sun. Looks totally crazy. And behind that, I describe how it works. And in fact, I even wrote it for the people I represent as a lobbyist. I work for industry people. They basically understand the EU, but the detailed mechanics are very weird to them. So I said, look, there is a different way. Make it a bit funny, take some distance. So I wanted to create this curiosity about this system.
Your book is fictional, but a lot of people working in Brussels recognize part of reality in it immediately. Were there real moments or negotiations that directly inspired the scenes in your book?
Well, I do really hope that they have recognized it. In fact, I've done different things. At first, I've put a lot of acronyms that are typical EU bubble. Even the name of this law, it's the Sunrise Acts for Sunlight, Resilient, Innovative and Sustainable Ecosystem. So you see, I've played with that a lot. But first, it's kind of a flavor of the political mood of the moment in the bubble. So I'm introducing it with these discussions on competitiveness versus the green agenda, on simplification versus overregulation. It starts with like a fake Marco Dragoni, making a report on the future in Europe and a fake von der Leyen, putting that on the agenda. So this is the introduction, but then it goes deep into the mechanics. I really try to illustrate through very short scenes how it works on what we do not see. How the Commission makes impact assessments, how they handle difficult inter-service consultations, how they work with lobbyists, also how the Parliament works when we are not in the public meetings. Also the trilogues, they are kind of an ecosystem of their own, with their own dynamics. So I really wanted to make it like a little theater and explaining with some jokes, but also a lot of procedural accuracy how it works.
A lot of outsiders imagine Brussels as a pure technocratic machine, but in your writing there is also a human aspect to it. What were you trying to tell the readers about power in the EU system?
You know, I've graduated in political science. You can make some analogies with hard science, and all the book is about that. First, you have political physics, how the institutions work, what are their procedures, their rules. And the procedures are very important in the book because they frame everything. Then you have political biology, the political organisms. So the people, the political parties, the MEPs, and they basically all compete for dominance or even for survival. So the egos, the personal agendas are very well covered as well. And then you have political chemistry. When you bring ideologies, interests, and you mix all that, it creates all kinds of reactions that can be very explosive at some times. So I've tried to make this parallel, but there is a parallel that hard science can never explain about policy. It's this kind of alchemy sometimes. You know, it creates some reactions, some unpredictable changes, and there are some elements also on that in the book. But I wanted to make it very, illustrative, concrete on procedures, human on people, and realistic also on how ideas can interact.
What do people misunderstand about where decisions are really made?
I think in the EU, decisions are not really made. They are more constructed through long processes. Because after all, it's a lot of stakeholders, member states, commission, MEPs. There is not a winning camp and a losing camp. So it constructs basically through procedure. And the EU was designed precisely for that, to have all these stakeholders absorbing conflicts through technical compromise. So of course, in a negotiation, the stakeholders will always start with a red light, say, it's never acceptable to me. And the process naturally brings that into an orange line. Something that, we can live it, we're not happy with it, but it's fine, better than nothing. You will never find green lines in new negotiations. And at the end, the process is all about that, bringing different legitimacies into compromise.
You've written that successful lobbying often comes from avoiding fatal mistakes. To which measure is lobbying treated as negative, and to what point policymakers actually depend on this external expertise?
Well, there are many lobbyists in the book. I've created also a full ecosystem. I think lobbying, it's really far from the shady image that we can see sometimes. I think it's an essential element of any democracy, because lobbyists, you know where it starts, where the name comes from. It comes from the hallway of the British Parliament, the lobby, literally, where there was for long a tradition of stakeholders coming there freely and interacting informally with members of Parliament. So that's a lobby. It's essential because it brings the experience and knowledge of organizations that are really working on the ground. Lobbyists, they bring real life considerations. And everyone can be a lobbyist. It's not only corporate interests. As long as you defend a cause, an interest, a worldview, you are a lobbyist. NGOs are lobbyists. What is important, and it connects to the fatal mistakes you refer to, is you have to be transparent. Who do you defend? What do you defend? Who is funding you? There is the EU Transparency Register to record all that. And at the end, you need to bring a good storytelling on your case, like how it connects to the political agenda. Then you need to come with concrete, actionable proposals, not just saying we need more competitiveness or more sustainability. This means nothing. You need concrete proposals, and you need to prove your case with data, with reports, and being transparent. And I think if you are not into that scope, you may risk yourself to make fatal mistake.
You argued that Europe doesn't have a regulation problem, but a regulation quality problem. Can you elaborate more on that?
I mean, I'm really not at ease with all these omnibus regulations that we see currently, that are basically trying to fix or simplify regulations that were adopted not so long ago. I do not want to judge on the substance of this omnibus, but rather on the process. Because it signals that there may have been something wrong with those legislations in the first place. So it's very disturbing to see that and having to rush this kind of corrections.
That's also where the better regulation process comes into place. How can this be used as a genuine policy-making tool?
Better regulation, it's very important. So in the jargon, it's basically the practical guidelines and toolbox that Commission officials will use when designing policy. So there are many tools like ex-ante impact assessments that we have to do before a legislative proposal to underpin it with evidence, then ex-post evaluations to also try to understand if something went wrong and perhaps correcting the regulation, and also all kinds of processes for consulting stakeholders. So when it's well used, it really enables evidence-based policymaking, to informing the political authority about the consequences. But very often it's also poorly used. And there is a chapter in the book, I called it, Don't Blame the Toolbox, Blame the User. And it tells the story of a very lazy bureaucrat who is in charge of making the impact assessment on the color of the sun. And he totally botched this, a total disaster. And they have to catch up all the work. Because in his mind, it's only, I have to tick a box, it doesn't matter. And doesn't think that it's a guide for informing the case. So I come with all kinds of stories like that.
More regulations versus less regulations. If this debate is wrong, what should Europe be debating about instead?
It's always difficult because it's obviously very different from one sector to another, and you cannot compare, the digital sector with the steel industry, with fisheries. They all have different approaches to regulation. What I observe more and more now is these attempts of having horizontal legislation, like these so-called acts, Innovation Act, Industrial Accelerator Act, Circular Economy Act. So they are in the making, so it's difficult to say whether they are useful or not. But there are no silver bullet in terms of regulation. There is rather a need to understand from the regulator point of view how the sectors evolve and innovate, and enabling that innovation while at the same time putting the right safeguards. And it's a trade-off that is very difficult to find. They need to bring stability, predictability, and adaptability together.
At the same time, Europe is trying to position itself as competitive in AI, green tech, digital infrastructure, and advanced industry. But can Europe stay innovative while also trying to regulate emerging technologies and industries?
That's all the story of that book. In fact, it starts with this legislation on the sun, which aims primarily to supporting the sectors that are dependent on the color of the sun. And it sets very ambitious targets and comes with a very complicated taxonomy of solar color. But at no moment, they really wonder, is the industry capable of handling that? And in a way, it's a bit what happened with some parts of the European Green Deal, because it's very easy to set targets in legislation. It looks very good. It's good for compelling communication, but the target as such do not create a transformative change in the industry. It's not because you say you want a green industry that you get one. I see that in my sector, which is building green ships. It's not because you say that shipping must decarbonize that you will resolve the problem of supply chain of clean fuels, of capacity of shipyards to renew the fleet, of also the financial capacity of ship owners to afford more expensive ships. These are things that take time. And the only effect then that may happen is that you make a gift to the Chinese industry. Say, look, we have very nice targets, we will push everyone to adapt, but at the end, it's not the European industry that is fully capable yet, because we are not having a concrete industrial policy that goes with these targets. So, of course, difficult for any industry to compete with the Chinese state, because it's what happens in practice.
You suggest that Europe often has the analysis, the report, and even the policy-making tools, but it struggles with execution. Using your book as an example, what are we missing when it comes to implementation? Well,
we talk a lot, of course, about gold plating, member states having their own tweak on legislation, but I think the problem is much deeper than that. And the book starts with this Marco Dragoni making a reflection on a kind of a metaphor with the sun. And he says, look, Europe likes to present itself as kind of the sun that illuminates the world. All the great ideas come from Europe. But at the same time, we don't even see the sun in the same color in Europe. So it's 27 pairs of eyes staring at the sun and then getting blind. So it starts like that. The problem, we all talk about this Draghi report on competitiveness. But did you know there was another Draghi report in 2015? It was the report of the 5 presidents. So Draghi was one of the presidents as ECB president. And they said something that was known already as of the Maastricht Treaty 30 years ago, that if you have like a single monetary policy and a single market, and at the same time, fragmented fiscal and investment policies and not a strong centralized Europe budget, and you are at a disadvantage compared to the United States or China that are perfectly coordinating all. So for me, the problem is more there, that we have certain tools that have been integrated, others that remain fragmented. These things have been documented for long, but nothing happens. And you cannot have an industrial policy if you do not leverage all these tools together. Mm-hmm. And so we are depriving ourselves of economic policy.
You have recently described European integration as a swimmer whose feet are stuck in the seabed. That's a very powerful image. Can you explain it?
It's obvious that we have geopolitical disruptions more visible and really affecting everything. And we have taken this crisis one after the other and are struggling, like just getting to the surface to get some air and working with temporary solutions. And at no moment we said perhaps the world has really changed and we need just to take a deep breath and try to really structurally change and equip ourselves with the right economic tools and policy tools. The problem is that if we continue that way, the system will politically exhaust itself, will drown. It's like, it's the way I understand Draghi when he says we are facing a slow agony. The European Union was designed to share wealth when all goes well, to share profitability and the benefits of single markets. But now it has to learn also to share when it hurts, or the pain, because we are facing now a lot of pain. And European solidarity will be a key factor here.
Are you optimistic about Europe's future?
I started my EU journey when I was 20 in 2005. At the time, I was campaigning in France for the French referendum on the European Constitution. At the time, I was very optimistic and idealistic as well. Now I'm 40. I have 2 young daughters. And I would not say I'm optimistic, but I think that the EU project is more necessary than ever. What else, honestly? It's the only project that brings at the same time peace, democracy, and that is very effective. It has proven its worth. So I'm always wondering, what's the alternative? But we are still stuck in, it's what I described before, this half-constructed union, so going very far in integrating certain parts of policy, but still not doing the job on other parts which are lacking. So I think, we are at a point where we are talking about the Brussels bubble. So we have to pop that bubble and make it accessible to citizens, and even before citizens, to the civil society in general. And I see a very important role here for political parties, for civil society organizations, trade unions, businesses, to be that, to have this discussion on Europe, on what is needed next. I have to say, if I have to be optimistic on something, and something I'm dreaming of at every European election, that I would see the parties across Europe campaigning on pan-European topics and pan-European programs. And once elected, just creating a coalition, like in any democracy, and imposing a program on the European Council and the European Commission. This is not happening. I'm still wondering why.
Thank you, Vincent, very much for being here today. And if you like this episode of A View from Brussels, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next time.